Hello traders, Rich here and welcome to Kucoin as episode 10, and today we are going to talk about supply and demand zones, how to identify the correct one and how to trade it. If you don't know about Kucoin, it's one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world with over 700 billion traded volume on the platform and 10 million registered users from more than 200 different countries. Kucoin has many features like margin trading, spot trading, trading bots, mining pools, staking, and many more with over 700 listed coins. If you don't have an account yet, I'll make sure to attach my referral link in the description below. And if you create an account through it, you'll benefit from 20% discounts on your trading fees. So let's get started. And as usual, cheers. Let's start with the definition of a supply and demand. When we have an aggressive movement upward, that's a demand zone. So as price retested, we'll be looking for buy setups. Vice versa, when we have an aggressive movement downward, that's a supply zone. And as price retests it, we'll be looking for sell setups. Keep in mind that a supply and demand zone is different than a support and resistance. So for example, we have a demand zone when we have an aggressive movement upward from one single untouched point, or what we call also a base. While to have a support, we'll need many failed attempts to break below a certain area. That's a support zone, right? Holding the price upward. Sometimes it happens that we have a demand zone around the support. Let me give you an example. So let's say price is failing to break below this area. Then we have here an aggressive movement upward. That's a support because we've got many rejections from it. And later on, it happens to be that we have a demand, we have an aggressive movement upward around that support area, which makes this area even stronger as it now becomes a support and a demand zone. But they are totally two different things, okay? But it happens sometimes that we will have a demand around a support and vice versa. Sometimes it happens to have a resistance. We have many failed attempts to break above a certain area, that's a resistance, and sometimes we'll have an aggressive movement down from it, that's a supply. But a resistance, we have many failed attempts to break above it, so like 2 or 3, while a supply is based from one single untouched point or base, okay? So 1 point for a supply and a demand, while multiple rejections for a support and resistance. So we've got two types of supply and two types of demand. The first one is called a rally-based rally. So price would be going upward, then pauses. We'll take an example about it on FTM, and then we had an aggressive movement upward. That's a rally, a base, and then a rally. That's why we call it RBR, okay? And as price retest this area, we'll be looking for buy setups. Vice versa, we'll also have a drop, base, then a rally, okay? So that's why we call it DBR. But no matter if it's a RBR or DBR, that's a demand zone. So if you want as a trick or as a cheat sheet, when you have an aggressive movement upward, that's a demand, no matter its type. Vice versa, we have a supply zone when we have a rally, base, and then a drop. So that's a RBD, okay? That's a supply. We're looking for sell on the retest, or it would be a drop, base, and then a drop again, okay? The opposite of rally, base, rally, okay? That's a supply zone. Anyway, don't worry about the names, like a name of it, it doesn't really matter. What matters is what really happened, okay? So that's basically it. Now let's take examples. Of course, keep in mind that a supply and demand zone is not foolproof. It's what I like to call bulletproof, right? So if I have a demand zone here, of course, price can still break it downwards, like we don't have any rejection, okay? So we'll be looking for buy setups around this demand zone. We always wait for the buyers to prove to us that they are strong enough to hold this demand to reject it. And we take more examples. Now let's start with our example on FTM. We can see two types of demand zones. Of course, we'll check supply in a bit, but for now, let's focus on demand zones. The first one is a drop, a base, as you can see, an aggressive movement upward. That's a demand zone. And the way I draw it is usually I highlight the entire base, so like this. Okay, so the entire consolidation before the aggressive movement upward happens. So in this case, that's our demand zone. It's just a zone. Like don't go for the exact one, okay, because we are not going to buy blindly around it. We'll be looking, zooming into lower time frames and look for buy setups. For example, in this particular case, let's make it appear on lower time frames. Now we'll be zooming in and waiting for the bulls to take over. In this particular case, this is our last high. Waiting for the bulls to take over by breaking above this high. Of course, you can even zoom into lower time frames, for example, H4, and look for bar setups as price dives inside the demand zone. Okay, and you can zoom in as much as you want, and you can apply the same style on lower time frames. For example, this demand zone is from weekly time frame, but you can also find supply and demand zones on H1, for example. However, like you already know that the higher the time frame, the stronger like the data economic factor would take place to make this zone or support or trend line, whatever, stronger. So the higher the time frames are always the better. Lower the time frames, chances are you will experience more noise, more fake outs, and so on. So that's it basically for the drop base rally, and we'll be looking for the buyers to take over to go long. The second type, which we can clearly see here, is what? A rally, a base, and then a rally again. Okay, that's a perfect example of a drop, base, rally, and a rally, base, rally. Just like here, for the base, we go for the entire consolidation, which you can see here. That's our demand zone. And previously, we were looking for bus stops here. We don't buy blindly, again and again. So you zoom into lower time frames, and as price approaches this demand zone, you start to look for buy stops. For example, you can zoom in, as per my trading plan, I zoom into H4 or daily, and then I'll be buying. Here we go. Let's wait for it. As you clearly see, the price kept on making lower highs and lower lows. That's the power of waiting for extra confirmation. You can see it. We go from daily, price is still diving inside the zone. So from daily time frame, I'm waiting for this high to be broken. Sorry, let me add it. Okay, so to be broken upward, or I can still zoom into lower time frames also and wait for the buyers to take over from a shorter term perspective. But this is my zone from daily time frame. So price kept on trading lower. This is our last high from H4 time frame. Okay, and here we go. So we broke our H4. So it depends on you if you want to like consider the H4 as your trigger time frame or the daily. Doesn't matter. In this case, we broke this and then we broke above the daily time frame, and we traded higher. I assume, yeah. Okay, and we traded higher. Anyway, let me pause it. Go to daily time frame. It's faster. And here we go. This is it. And now price approached what? A supply zone. Okay, but anyway, let's focus on demand for FTM. Here we go, right? So that's a drop base rally and a rally base rally. Now let's go over a supply zone. Let's go and take an example on near. Okay, here we go. As you clearly see, we've got an aggressive movement downward from this area. And we'll take an example about this demand zone also, because as I mentioned previously, they are not foolproof. They are not bulletproof. Okay, always wait for extra confirmation that the buyers or the sellers are taking over. Now let's focus on this supply zone. We have an aggressive movement downward. We can see it even better from lower time frame. Here we go. Right, so price was trading higher and higher. We don't really have aggressive movements. We had an aggressive movement upward here. That's a short-term demand. Aggressive movement upward here. That's a short-term demand. Aggressive movement upward from here. That's a massive demand zone, and an aggressive movement downward here. So these are the only aggressive movements we can see on near. Of course, we also saw this one from weekly. We'll check it out in a bit. Of course, we don't buy blindly. Demand, looking for the buyers to take over, and then we enter the buy. Demand, looking for the buyers here after breaking above this high, to take over before we we enter our buy. Let's focus now on the supply. As you can see, we have an aggressive movement upward from here, multiple big bearish candles. That's how you confirm that's a strong supply. Where's our base? It's this entire consolidation before we have this aggressive movement downward. Of course, as I mentioned, we don't sell blindly. In case of a supply, wait for extra confirmation. In this case, we have these major lows from daily time frame. Of course, you can even zoom into lower time frame and look for potential setups around this area. Okay, a very strong supply, but from a here we go. From a long-term perspective, from H4, this is it. So you can enter your sell here. I'm not going to like focus on risk management and entry, stop loss, and so on for this video. Let's focus only on like how to identify a strong supply and demand zone, and vice versa. If you remember, we had a demand zone here, an aggressive movement output was visible from daily time frame. So that's our base. Okay, so as price retested, waiting for the boost to take over, and here we go. Okay, now as I mentioned, supply and demand zones are not foolproof, they are not bulletproof. So for example, we have an aggressive movement output from here, right? So previously had this demand, which I showed you like from daily at H4, an aggressive movement output from it. And we're looking for buy stops here, which I showed you. Now we've got this aggressive movement upward, and as price retested, we zoom into lower time frames and look for buy setups. We don't like buy blindly. If you zoom into daily, here we go. We were waiting for the boost to take over and it didn't happen. That's the power of waiting for extra confirmation. Price kept making lower highs and lower lows. So previously, I can still remember this trade. I was waiting for this high, then price made a lower high. I was waiting for this. We also had a trend line forming, but obviously the buyers didn't take over. So the demand is not foolproof. It can still be broken downward. In this case, it happened. And one more difference between a support and a demand, and of course a supply and a resistance, is when a support is broken downward, it can become as a potential resistance. While if a demand is broken downward, it becomes nothing. You simply delete it, right? However, in this particular case, we already have a support also, as we've got many rejections from it. Was acting as a resistance previously, broken output, support multiple times. So now as price retested, we'll be looking for some setups because now it's acting as a resistance area. Okay, last but not least, NIR is also approaching this demand zone just like FTM. This is our consolidation before the aggressive movement output started. So now we have a resistance here. That's how you make sense of the chart and you gather as many info as possible. And that's a demand zone. So now we'll be looking for buy stops because first of all, price can still dive inside it before trading higher. So we don't want to buy blindly here. Second, price can still break it downward like there is no demand zone. So now we zoom into lower time frames and wait for the boost to take over. For example, on H4 time frame, we've got a channel forming. Here we go. That's it, right? So forming a channel, waiting for the boost to take over like this, and then we can enter our buy. Or you can even zoom into lower time frames. You can zoom in as much as you want, depends on your style, trading plan, and the type of trader. So this is it from a short-term perspective. Let's go for blue and waiting for the buyers to take over this particular case. Meanwhile, until the buyers take over, we can still trade lower inside the demand, which is a massive one from weekly before trading higher. So that's basically it for supply and demand zones. Let me know in the comments if you like this tool. And if you haven't checked the previous episodes, yes, we've got 9 episodes about supply and resistance, market structure, trend line, channels, and the correlation, and so on. Okay, so enjoy it and let me know which topic you would like me to cover next. And I'll see you on the next one.